The anime talks about a certain period of time when a third galactic reich had started. The mankind kept pursuing its conquest of the cosmos in a short period. 70% of the human population had left the Earth and got divided into opposing factions, the Dorsia and the Aras, the Atlantic Ring United States, and there is the Jor, a neutral country in space where a kind boy named Haruto Tokishima lives, a totally normal life with his friend, taking lessons in Sakimura Academy and practicing different kind of sport. By time he realized he's in love with his classmate Shoko, but he never had the nerve to confess it. Back to spaceship that sent information about having 2 transfer students for Sakimura Academy on board, but as they meet their teacher, it turns out that they are more than 2 and they are spies working for the Dorsian Army Special Forces. They start hanging all around the academy, looking for the main lab of the city. One of the kids is called LF, he seems to be their leader, and by one side he could analyze the building. Now he knows how many students, rooms, tables are in the building without even being so close, so he concludes the lab is underground, and their mission stand on stopping the doctors from releasing a huge super robot made to stop any attack of the Dorsians. Back to Haruto, who's out with a couple of his friends for a walk to Shrine, where confessing wishes make them true. The boy here tries to confess his love for Shoko, but before he says a word, his city gets attacked by the Dorsian for no reason and the war gets started. The doctors in the lab decide to release the robot, but before turning it on, the kids from the Dorsian Army Special Forces arrive and kill them all. Outside the lab, it rains bullets, so Haruto and his friend decide to hide. Shoko rushes to a broken car to save an injured person trapped inside, but unfortunately she gets bombarded and she vanishes in front of the guy who loves her the most. Right after this, the boy becomes thirsty for revenge and jumps to the robot and decides to control it in order to destroy the enemy. But before he starts, he sees in the screen a notification telling him that in order to activate the robot, he must resign humanity. The boy blindly agrees on the request and quit being a human, and indeed, after a couple of minutes of fighting, he kills all the spaceship of the Dorsian. After getting out of the machine, Haruto meets LF, one of the kids who belonged to the Dorsian Army Special Forces. He stabs him in the chest and shots him many times. Then before leaving, Haruto rises back up again and attacks him from behind, biting his neck. Shortly after, the friends of each LF and Haruto arrive at the scene. The Dorsians express their desire to take Valvrave and point their guns on the others, but suddenly Haruto wakes up in Elf's body and shoots one of the Dorsian spies. Then he helps his friend to escape into a safe place, where he takes a couple of minutes trying to prove he's the real Haruto inside the body of the spy. Later, he decides taking his body back and also the robot Valvrave from the Dorsian who took them away. He first kills 2 guards to reach a helicopter that will help him to get to the enemy's research facility where the body and the robot are. As he arrives there with his friends who also want to join this fight, he successfully secures his body back, but realizes the body is in a good shape and there is no injuries even when LF stabbed his chest. After he gets inside Valvrave with his friends Shoko and the body, the girl ties his hand and asks him to bite the body in order to get his original form, and indeed, after he followed what she said, he switched the body. Then he starts controlling the robot to escape from the enemy's facility, but they find themselves in space and the enemy manages catching up to them. A severe fight starts right away with the enemy. Mika and Haruto is busy, so LF take advantage of the situation and takes the girl as a hostage, asking the boy to surrender. But then he realizes he became a traitor since his friends tell him he shot one of the spies, but he doesn't remember any of this. Right beside him, Haruto receives an unexpected call from Shoko, his childhood crush, and it turns out she's alive, so he promises to find her again. Sooner after this, Valvrave gets hit by the enemy and it overheats. The pilot inside feels lost, but LF helps him by giving some instructions. By following them, the robot makes a golden light and shows a huge potential, so the enemy retreats in fear. After returning safely, the Dorsian spy gets arrested and the boy goes to meet the love of his life, but this time he refused confessing his love since he's no longer a human. In the next day, the Aros Lunar Orbit Army arrives at the city. All the students feel safe and run to thank Haruto for all the help he gave. Underground, LF is being investigated by the officers and it turns out he eliminated a battalion 5,000 strong by himself in the New Guinea conflict 2 years ago, and this got him the moniker One-Man Army. Outside, the Jor seems to count on the Aros to protect them from any other attack. Later, Haruto reveals to his friends the secret of his regeneration, and while he's still talking, he unconsciously attacks his friend Kuma and tries to to bite his neck like a vampire. Saki manages slapping his face and turns him back to normal, and they all realize he's no longer a normal human. While they try to find a solution, the boy gets informed that Senator Figaro wants to talk to him. The politician thanked the boy for the help he did after defeating the Darcian forces, then he asked him to write a comment in a website called Rainbow for all the people outside to inform them that he is safe and the Aras army saved them. And now he is considered as the high school boy who stood alone against the dreadful Darcian army, and for the sake of everyone's survival, he decides to help the Aras to fight against the Darcian. Later, LF manages escaping from the basement he was in after killing all the guards and the investigators. Then all the army forces start following him, but he manages avoiding them and killing them since he's already known as the one-man army. Shoko in the other side goes to a dark room where a girl with a red hair is facing a screen that shows the full cameras of the academy, and the girl sees everything. Suddenly, the station got alerted of an attack from the Darcian, and the safe evacuation of the students cannot be guaranteed, which means they are locked in. All the students start panicking. In the dark, Haruto turns around and sees the prisoner who escaped, LF. He is now asking him to make a contract and work together in order to bring revolution to Dorsia. The boy gets surprised since the spy is from Dorsia, but he defends himself by saying that the very foundation of the world need to be changed. After gathering their potential and using Valvrave, the revolution can come about 5 years ahead of the schedule. The spy asks Haruto to keep the contract with the senator, but the boy refused, so the request become an order, and refusing it can cause the death of Shoko, his dear. The boy finds himself obliged to stay in his hands. However, he stands on the same opinion and refuses to give a hand, so LF asks him to do a peace sign whenever he changes his mind and needs his help. The boy leaves, and while he's been outside, he finds the senator testing the robot in a random solder, even when Haruto refuses doing so. As soon as the solder touches the screen, he gets injected in the neck and dies after his head exploded. The boy gets surprised because this didn't happen to him. Suddenly, the Darcian forces start to appear, and the Aras are not even ready. The senator loses his mind and decides to leave the students behind even after promising Haruto to save them. The boy gets angry and starts fighting the senator, but he gets the answer that only the senator decides who gets saved, and the guards capture the robot and the boy since he's the only one who can control it. Meanwhile, the girl Shoko is in the surveillance room with a red-haired girl, and she sees that the situation is not as good as the senator shows to the student. The girl calls the students and informs them everything she heard, and in order to get convinced, they make a plan to spy on the Aras army. Some students, including Shoko, get inside the facility and find Haruto cuffed. They release him and go outside to inform the rest of the students. The senator ignores them and shoots Yamada, who was standing on his way, while he takes the robot also. When the boy saw the robot being transported, he rushes to stop them. On his way, and before getting shot, he bites one of the guards, so he switches the body again, just like it happened in the first time with the spy. Haruto enters the robot and starts controlling it. Then LF appears and starts explaining the danger which they are surrounded by. Then the girl Shoko rushed to Haruto and asked him to rise her to give a word to the other students. Now she asks the senator to stand with them in their war against the Darcians, where all the families will be saved, and at the first mistake they will give the robot to the enemy. The robot can turn the tide of the war. Sooner after this, the George start fighting back, and they successfully defeat their enemy with the help of the robot and Haruto, who destroyed the connection between the Darcians' facility and the George city. The George city since the Lost War lives in peace and justice, ruled by the students who declared the independence of their land. They all work for each other and decide not to rely on anyone anymore. Few days later, and while everything works perfectly, the electricity cut out. The conflicts appear between the students, and they start blaming Shoko for all this, since she was the one who announced the idea of the independence. Sooner after this, other students risk their lives to turn on the lights again, and the problem seemed to be solved. The community starts celebrating their first victory, while Saki and Haruto decide to explore and go underground their city. And there they discover more robots, but this time the boy refuses revealing them to people because he doesn't want more immortal guys like him, and he considers it as a curse. The girl agrees on keeping the information a secret, but she enters one of them because she wants to be famous, and somehow she didn't die like the soldier, and she controls her green robot perfectly. Haruto chases her and tries to explain that to use those robots she must be careful. The girl tricks him for a while, and then she bites his neck just the way he did before, and she switches the body. Now she's enjoying being a guy, and especially being Haruto. All this, and LF is watching. In the next day, everything is normal until the Darcian army starts attacking, which means the Aras failed protecting the George city, and now it's totally surrounded by the enemy forces. The student at this moment realizes Saki has also become an immortal, and she uses a robot called Caramilla, and she gets out fighting the enemy. Few minutes later, Haruto joins her, and they work as a group, especially after hearing all the other students cheering for them. The enemy's forces find themselves obliged to retain and run back to their city, promising to come again for revenge.